Huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am one of your hosts, Taylor.
And I'm your other host, Reuben.
That is right. And today we have a pretty awesome topic of discussion. Before we get into that, a couple of plugs. You can find us on our website, CryptidClues.ca. You can also find us with email, CryptidClues@gmail.com, if you want to say hello, have any questions, just want to reach out. And you can also find us on our social media platforms, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. But you can also get exclusive ad-free episodes on our Patreon. We just did a whole revamping of our Patreon because thanks to you guys, March has been our biggest month so far since we started this show, and we can't thank you enough. But to show our thanks, we had to just touch up the Patreon a little bit. So we've revised the 3 tiers, and now you can get ad-free episodes on there, early episodes. You can get our monthly behind-the-scenes round-off episode that's exclusive only to the Patreon feed, and then you can get some cool perks too. We got some stickers in there at some of the tiers. We got some postcards on some of the tiers, just to kind of like really show our thank you and support to you guys for being there every step of the way. And another important thing to shout out is there's an individual, young lad named Alex, who reached out asking for some information and everything. And just want to say thank you for being a listener, Alex. You are fantastic, and I wish you the best on the research that you are conducting for your school.
It really warmed my heart when you sent me that. I was like, "Aw."
Oh, it was really, really nice. Yeah, it was really nice. But yeah, without further ado, we're going to be talking about Bigfoot and UFOs.
Such a good topic to get into after our interview with Ron there. So back in 2021, the government released many documents on UFOs, now referred to as UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena. While the government admits that some 140 so reports of UFOs are real, they won't really attempt to discuss them. 20 of these released accounts are of objects or phenomena that move unlike anything we are used to, and at speeds beyond the capabilities of any known technology. While the government of the United States says that these reports are not proof of extraterrestrial life, UFOs are commonly intelligent in design and movement. Someone or something may be controlling them. I feel like, at this point with the whole government and UFO topic, we're about to get a knock from the Men in Black for this. And actually, Taylor, I've got a funny story to tell you. This happened the other day after our interview. I was at work, and we had a Sony representative hooking up demo TVs and such in the store. I wasn't aware of what he looked like, so I went about my shift in my own department, totally unaware that he had brought free merchandise for all the workers. At a random point during the day, he found me and approached me. A small, clean man in a black suit with dark glasses on extended his arms straight out in a somewhat awkward pose. In his hand, he was holding a pen with his thumb pressed onto the top of it. And my first thought wasn't anything in particular but silent confusion. He stood there for a second, and I thought of the Men in Black movies and how they hold up the little neuralizers to wipe people's memories. And just before I thought, oh no, because of that interview, I know too much, he quickly said, "I have a pen for you." I didn't actually believe I was going to have my memories wiped, but the correlation was funny. And now I have a fancy Sony pen. By the way, they're not a sponsor.
What if he did wipe your mind and he just made you think that your whole new life is based on getting a fancy Sony pen?
Ooh, what a twist. I don't know. Why are we doing this podcast again? What is this about?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Anyways, back to the topic at hand, Taylor.
You said that like you were gonna fall with something. You had like the biggest cliffhanger after that. Was that thrown to me? Am I going? Am I right?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. Oh, that was funny. Yeah, you touched upon it there. Yeah, the CIA released thousands of these UFO documents back a couple of years ago. It spans over about 70 years. I actually pulled up a lot of these documents and looked at some of them and was reading through a whole bunch of them. But yeah, they deal primarily with UFOs, which of course still remain a mystery. So it's not concrete evidence that, hey, we're dealing with extraterrestrial beings. A lot of these sightings, however, are just, identified lights moving around in controlled flight paths and mysteriously vanishing. And there was about, I think, 2,700 pages of scanned documents that involve these unidentified aerial phenomena, which, again, you mentioned UAPs. And that's how the U.S. government addresses them. It's their term for UFOs. So these documents are all organized and condensed into what I found, 713 PDF files for ease of viewing, and they were uploaded to a website called the Black Vault. And this was all done by an individual who is the founder of this site, the Black Vault, called John Greenwald Jr. So he got all this information that was released, condensed it up, and as I said, I went through a lot of these sheets and documents, and it's quite astounding. There's some that are pretty damn hard to read. It's really old stuff from 50s and 60s. The ink is really all blurred together, but you can make out a lot of stuff of them talking about all these different sightings, and these are prominent high-ranking government officials that are viewing these documents and signing these documents.
That's crazy.
It's very crazy. Congress had demanded that the previous December, so this is leading up to 2021, that the Pentagon release some of its classified UAP-related documents within 180 days. And again, this was very weird because it's just a bizarre add-on to the United States COVID-19 relief bill that they did. It's just a very weird thing to throw alien or UAPs attached to that. I just thought that was kind of a funny little strange connection there. But one of the most powerful governments in the world has openly acknowledged that we are dealing with unknown flying objects. And I have two of these videos that came out of the Pentagon, and I'm sure you've seen these, Reuben. They were released a little bit ago. They were leaked initially, and then the Pentagon came out and just said, yeah, these are official. And that was with the discretion and the permission of the pilots and the officers that were involved with this. So I'm going to play one, and for you audio listeners, you'll be able to kind of pick up on this too. So the first I'm going to play for you is these objects are basically shooting down, and the personnel is trying to basically catch onto one with its targeting system. And we can hear what they say here. So mind the audio if you have it full blast here.
Nickel 6-1 Tango Roger, over. Roger, there's troubleshooting shooting
Did you box moving target?
No, I took an auto track.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Wow.
So that was the first one.
Wow,
I just think that's
they're pretty
crazy.
excited.
They're very excited. I don't blame them because you can see these things are shooting like crazy, and he's trying to hone in and lock onto one, and then he gets it. I'm assuming he's locking onto a heat signature or something like that, because I wouldn't. If it's unidentified, how do you know what to lock on with, right? But it looks like it's thermal imagery initially. And then I have the second clip here, and this one is much more intense because they're following it right from the get-go here.
Dude, there's on, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
My gosh.
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not.
That is the LNS, dude.
Well, if there's
Look at that thing.
it's rotating.
Wow, that rotation is something else. No, I've seen some clips like this. I think there's some more, but I haven't heard the audio to those before, actually.
Like they don't know what to make of it. That's my interpretation, especially when you see something going against the wind, starts rotating and just doing
Looks
its
very
own maneuvers.
UFO-like for sure.
Absolutely. So you take these videos, you stack it with these documents, Again, like I said, these documents span over decades. Some of the pages list sightings that happen not only in North America, but well over in Europe, in Berlin, Germany. And it's like 6 different sightings all on one page document. Highly recommend that. I'm going to try and put those into a link for the blog as well, so you guys can kind of tune into that. But yeah, I'm just curious. How do you feel about so far what I've shown you here, Reuben?
Like I was saying there, I've seen some videos like that in the past that were probably leaked, right? But this is the first time that I've seen those 2 particular ones with audio. And that audio is something else, just hearing their excitement and stuff. They're a little freaked out. They didn't know what they were witnessing, really, it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I mean, it's all unidentified, but but yeah, so it's incredible the amount of information we have. And again, just remember, it is confirmed by the government, so you can trust the government now that they
that
said UFOs. Yeah, that UFOs are a real thing, unidentified. So
yeah, although they haven't said that extraterrestrial life is a real thing, they have
That's
confirmed that UAPs, what they call UFOs, are in fact real, and a lot of those reports are real. Mm-hmm. Wow, so those are quite prevalent in our culture now. I mean, for years, sightings have increased and become more commonplace, much like our favorite cryptid Bigfoot has. Taylor, do you have anything else to add before we start to dive into the Bigfoot aspect of this whole phenomenon?
Well, I mean, yeah, the connection, that's the tricky thing. And maybe this is I have some information that comes from Dr. Meldrum, and this maybe kind of is a little bit, I don't want to say like debunk, but he has a different approach when it comes to that. But I wanted to offer the both sides kind of perspective. So again, if you're aware of who he is, he's very prominent in the Bigfoot community. And if you aren't aware, he is a professor of anatomy and anthropology. And he's argued basically that Bigfoot and Sasquatch type cryptids from around the world are connected to the fact that at times in human history, different species of Homo sapiens existed at the same time, coexisting. And we know this, we could tell that from bones and certain lineages of genetics and DNA in humans nowadays. You can see how the species had intermingled a little bit. But as possibly and as recently as 30,000 years ago, it's highly likely that there are more than half a dozen of human species that lived together on Earth. So it outputs the question, is Bigfoot a survivor of one of these old human lineages? And that's kind of like one of the possibilities, because we're going to kind of branch into there being 2 paths of where Bigfoot could kind of stand a little bit.
2 paths. We have a 3rd path as well that leads right into an ad break. Welcome back, everybody. Oh, I love
so
spicy
brutal.
ad breaks. Unless you're a Patreon subscriber, in which case you get a moment of silence.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I feel bad about that one. That was harsh.
A 3rd path. So there are discussions of Bigfoot being the operators of some of these alien crafts. But again, we don't have definitive proof. But let's play with this concept hypothetically. If Bigfoot does fly here on ships for expeditions, then it explains why I've not found a body. It also adds credit to the fact that despite a Bigfoot's naturally large size, they can seemingly disappear without a trace via their starship. Mm-hmm. Totally makes sense in this hypothetical kind of route we're taking. So if Bigfoot is an alien, then that means we must accept a whole new field of view, being that Bigfoot is linked to humanity, similarly as how we are linked with primates. So that again is a whole nother can of worms. But if Bigfoot does fly ships and that activity is linked to even a paranormal phenomena, then everything has to be rethinked again. Did Bigfoot develop this technology, or is life here seeded from another home planet? And that goes in line with something else that I have found called the panspermia hypothesis. Have you heard of this?
I have not. Do you want to describe that?
So this is the hypothesis that life exists throughout the entire universe, and it's distributed by space dust, meteoroids, asteroids, comets, planetoids, as well as by spaceships carrying unintended contamination by microorganisms.
Mm-hmm. Before we dive a little further into that there too, I mean, when we get to the connection with Bigfoot and UFOs, well, there's always the possibility, like you said there, that maybe they're piloting UFOs, they're their own little alien species that fly around, right? Mm-hmm. There's actually interesting things to connect to that. Whether we're talking about UFOs, ghosts, or Bigfoot, there is something that's commonplace in a lot of reports and encounters with these things. They all share similar signs, such as, disappearing beings, fast-moving objects, but most importantly, strange lights. When you look at everything holistically, some of the dots kind of come together, and those dots being the orbs that are seen floating around a lot of sightings. Ghost sightings have orbs. Bigfoot sightings occasionally report strange orbs following the creatures. UFO sightings have orbs. If you see Bigfoot signs in the woods, but you come up short of seeing a hairy giant, a strange light is often seen instead. And orbs of light, this is just shockingly similar. Could these orbs maybe be some kind of presence bleeding into reality? If we ever figure out the answer to the orbs, well, it would probably answer how Bigfoot disappears so suddenly if they are, in fact, capable of doing so. Perhaps what we're seeing is something quite related to our interview with Ron Moorhead from last time, Taylor. Do you want to dive back into that?
Yeah, so again, that's something Ron talked about, was the quantum physics aspect to Bigfoot. And again, that can't be discredited at all because there's so much connected here. And I looked more into the different quantum realms, and even though we have evidence to support 4 of these dimensions, that'd be like first, second, third, fourth, like time, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 1-dimensional. So we can still use math and science to hypothesize the other higher dimensions. And it makes sense how, if beings can tap into those higher levels, the abilities that come with it, and also the realm that they must adhere to when accessing these levels. So it makes sense when you hypothesize. My big words. Right. My big words are getting the better of me here.
Usually you mispronounce things that are outside of Canada.
Yeah. Hypothesize.
Oh. Actually, we're bad at pronouncing Canadian things too. Oh my goodness.
When you brainstorm this, I'm going to go with that word.
Brain think too hard.
Yeah. So.
You're totally saying it right, by the way. Every single time you said it right.
I didn't feel like I was saying it right. I was doubting myself. So this is what seems to be the baseline, though, of these two fields of thought when it comes to Bigfoot. So again, like the Bigfoot is a flesh and blood creature, and that's it. And others stick to the interdimensional alien aspect. But
I was going to say, I think quantum mechanics, honestly, this whole thing about different dimensions and different planes to reality, in a sense, could hold a lot of answers. If UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, and the like exist parallel to this reality or in another one altogether, but cross over to our 3D plane, maybe they all kind of share a space together, a common ancestry from that realm. One theory, actually, I don't know. Should I dive into my theory of Bigfoot that I've written down here, Taylor, or do you want to dive into more of your notes?
Do it. Just
cool. I'm excited to talk about this. So I don't want to take away from some of yours here, but we can crawl back if we have to. One thing that could possibly create the theory of Bigfoot being alien species or hybrids, or even prisoners dropped here on this planet by an alien species, is going all the way back to a starting point. And we're going to go way, way back for this. The earliest recorded literary account of a large, hairy wild man can be found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a Sumerian text written about 4,000 years ago. Gilgamesh is the hero king of Uruk, reputedly one of the oldest cities in the world. And Gilgamesh, who goes in search of immortality, takes with him Enkidu, a wild man who was created by the gods. Now, that's an interesting note there, because we don't really have a lot of context around it. But if Enkidu did not have children or offspring, perhaps there was an entire race of beings like him that were put on this planet or found access to this place from another realm. And Enkidu, just in general, was described as a giant, hairy man, by the way. Basically, Bigfoot in appearance. In more modern times, it's kind of shifted to showcase Enkidu as being a really, really large pet lion. But it's important to note that in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Enkidu was Gilgamesh's friend, and that he was basically intelligent and capable of interacting with him. So there's lots of theories about that, but theories are, in a sense, just theories. So why was Bigfoot maybe created by aliens if we're going to assume that maybe Enkidu was a Bigfoot or something like that created by the gods? Is Bigfoot just a form an interdimensional being can take, or is it something about aliens creating stuff. Well, according to ancient Sumerian slash Akkadian tablets found in Nineveh across from Mosul, which is modern day Iraq now, we have some bits of knowledge that were translated by Zechariah Sitchin. The tablets relate to the genetic engineering that took place from earthly stock, so a slave race of beings could be created to mine for gold. Do you know where this is heading, Taylor? I believe we've brought up their name before.
Oh, yeah. It rhymes with Sanunnaki.
The very reason the Anunnaki came to Earth, they needed gold to repair the atmosphere of Nibiru, which was translated to be the planet of the crossing, but also could possibly have been like a ship or something, like a starship. So regardless, after many, many prototypes of beings were tested, they settled on Homo sapiens to mine for their gold. The Nephilim fit within this theory as well, beings created by the lust of fallen angels. At this point, you can just intermingle the words aliens and angels. They all seem to come from the same place in ancient texts. There's an interesting note to mention on the Nephilim aspect of this from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is from the book of Jasher, a book excluded from the Old Testament, much like the book of Enoch. In the book of Jasher, it was stated that Jesus himself was carried across the river by a giant genetically engineered creature, St. Christopher. If this is true, it would provide further proof that the Nephilim survived the flood. And I think we've kind of touched on St. Christopher before. He was basically, in description, a dog man.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that super interesting. Now, it would be proof that the Nephilim survived the flood. But I think it's, honestly, relating this to the Anunnaki thing, quite interesting to note how many different species of Nephilim there could be. So while the book of Jasher has been excluded from the Bible, it is actually still mentioned in the books we have today. In 2 Samuel 1:18, the book is plainly mentioned by David, just referenced in name. And it's also possibly referenced in the books of Joshua and Kings as well, not directly by name, but they make reference to it and elements from that book. So whether it's the Bible or the context of ancient aliens mentioning this kind of genetic engineering, this all brings us back to giant hairy creatures roaming the earth that were possibly genetically modified or dropped here by aliens. Bigfoot could easily be a supernatural entity, which is pretty much what Ron Moorhead was talking about in the interview, linking back to quantum mechanics and realms and things like that. What are your thoughts on that, Taylor?
Well, you had mentioned here that the book of Jasher has been excluded from the Bible. Why is that exactly? Was it because of what it was talking about?
Well, so it's our modern Bible here is basically a bunch of compilations of different translated literatures that were written by prophets or by people that followed God, that were instructed by God to write these books. A lot of what we have is just the books that were basically, God told people to write these books. People wrote the books. We translated them. They all fit together. Everything seems to fit together like a puzzle piece. Big, big puzzle. Now you have these other books that weren't necessarily instructed to be written. They're written by people of the time that existed alongside the prophets and stuff writing these books because they're referencing these books. They're written as history context. Hey, this is what happened. This is what I saw. This is things that happened in biblical times, basically. But they're not written because God told them to.
I see.
So oftentimes those books are excluded because they don't fit basically within the Bible being God's word. But they're books from biblical times.
I would love to read archives of those books.
Mm-hmm. They're very interesting. I have read the Book of Enoch, which dives into the Nephilim and a whole bunch of different races of angels and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very interesting to see that kind of depiction from a biblical book that just dives into and goes, hey, you know what? Let's talk about the angels. Let's talk about this race. Let's talk about that race. Let's talk about what they look like and what they do. Now, I could also see these books being excluded for reasons that they don't necessarily conform to a narrative in modern times. They could be seen as troublesome when people start to theorize and come up with biblical practices that aren't actually in the Bible, but are things surrounding the Bible. They come up with their own rules and methods, and then you have one little mention in an earlier book that says something else. Well, it's not God's word, so we can exclude that, right?
Plus, you don't want to be spreading the word about Jesus being carried around by a dog man. I imagine that's kind of frowned upon.
Yeah, that would probably add a lot of questions to people. They wouldn't be able to understand that, and they'd go, well, what's going on? If Jesus is willing to be carried by a dog man, is he willing to lead us into another ad break? And we're back.
Oh, you got me good. Oh my God, I can't believe that.
That was a spicy one too.
I was so enveloped into your tale right there. You totally just pulled me along for that. Oh, that was fantastic.
I had to make up for earlier when I was saying back to the topic at hand, and before we started this podcast, you briefly went over my notes and said, hey, when you get to this point, I'll pick up from here. And I thought, oh, Taylor, you'll just remember. I'll say back to the topic at hand, Taylor. And then you were invested.
I was so invested. It completely went over my, yeah. Well, back to the topic at hand. Yes. I'm glad you brought all of that historical biblical can of worms. That's fantastic, because I was not informed about a lot of that. I think that's incredible. That's awesome. And I do love how far back the wild man goes. And as we all know, there's a lot of religious paintings and tapestries that depict not only wild men, but a lot have UFOs or chariots of fire in the sky, and it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So again, on this topic of Bigfoot and aliens just kind of meeting in the middle, I found that Pennsylvania is one of the most biggest American states for UFO sightings, and many of those sightings including Bigfoot.
Oh.
For example, in the countryside near Uniontown on October 25th, 1973, witnesses saw a glowing object in the sky that landed in a pasture, and 2 Bigfoot creatures came out of the woods. So I also have a map here, and this...
Quickly, I was going to state, do you think the Bigfoot came out of the UFO? Do you think the UFO dropped them off? Or do you think they got so scared by the UFO, they just came running out of the woods?
They're all likely plausible possibilities. I mean, I kind of think they maybe dropped off and they just stumbled out, because I mean, Bigfoot aren't inclined to kind of expose themselves, and even if they get scared, they usually don't. In people's encounters, they don't seem to run out into the open when they're startled. Unless they are aware of what these aliens are or what this ship is. I don't know. Maybe they might have some kind of more insight.
Do you think there's a difference then between Bigfoots that are dropped off by this other alien race and Bigfoots that have been here for a long time and have been breeding and carrying on their life naturally?
Are you trying to like segue into like Bigfoot with different eyes and their different looks and stuff? Or are you just genuinely curious? Because I think they're probably different, and it would mean their mentality, right?
That could be. There's another can of worms I don't really want to pry open yet, but we've talked about the different eyes before. And going through this with the genetic engineering and stuff, I remember reading some stuff here online that we have to dive into later on in another episode that talked about genetic engineering to make vessels for these aliens and stuff to connect with later on. So whether that's aliens or demons or whatever possessing these creatures, basically they have a bunch of things here on the planet already that they could just pop into and control. Whether you believe that or not, that's one of the many interesting theories and fun things to talk about. But carry on, Taylor. I won't distract you any further.
No, that just you reminded me of like a War of the Worlds type scenario where the things are the vessels are already there.
Bigfoots just come running out of the woods one day with a bunch of dogmen and they just start attacking.
I have thought of this. I'm not even kidding. When I'm in town sitting at a red light, I just think, if a whole team of, let's say, like 4 dozen Bigfoot and a couple dogmen attacked the city that I live in, we'd be hooped. Cops wouldn't be able to do anything. I mean, they wouldn't be able to get the military here fast enough. And let's say if they attacked on a coordinated level across the whole country of Canada, I mean, we'd be hooped, absolutely hooped. What would you do? You couldn't hide in your house. They'd break the doors down. They'd come after you.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, we have them being supernatural entities from a higher plane, kicking around the woods, trying to maybe connect with us and teach us a spiritual lesson.
Yeah, that's definitely the optimistic approach to it as well.
One's the zombie invasion.
Yeah.
The other is a higher plane of existence for us to evolve into.
Yes, and I would prefer that one. I don't want to be attacked by Bigfoot or Dogman. So I have this map here, and again, this will be in the blog if you check out our website. I just want to pop it up because someone had posted a bunch of UFO and Bigfoot sightings all together. They even threw Thunderbird sightings as well in there, which is kind of cool. But you can see a concentration of sightings for Bigfoot and UFO in the southern eastern states. And once you get up to that Pennsylvania area, it just kind of like thickens up a little bit. But yeah, Kentucky, Tennessee, all around those areas, it's just really, really thick.
You can hardly make out the word Pennsylvania. It's this like lumped in there, and there's just all these different little Bigfoot markers and UFO markers for people that are just listening to this.
Yeah. And
that map is just covered.
It is. Again, there's a whole arsenal of other maps you can find online. A lot of people detailing like lots of sightings being a lot more central America. And then if you go up, that was just the United States of America. If you go into Canada, I know Canada all along BC, there's tons of Bigfoot sightings and stuff, especially going. I was going to say,
back to the States here, if you're in North Dakota or South Dakota, according to this map we're looking at, you have a boring life in the skies above you. There's nothing there, at least not on this map.
South Dakota. Oh, right dead center there. Yeah. I mean, there's like...
Yeah, it's just empty.
It's just empty, yeah.
Well, it's also interesting to note that all these sightings are much closer to water.
Interesting. Yeah, they are. Very interesting.
It kind of just surrounds everything by the ocean, and then there's all the lakes above Pennsylvania and Michigan. Sightings everywhere.
Maybe that's a result, too, of just humans, because as humans, we naturally are kind of drawn to residing near bodies of water, right?
Yeah.
Especially
that's
the
totally
ocean.
Possible.
So much more population on the sides equals more sightings as opposed to being more central, I guess.
Everything's possible. I guess we could go out into the middle of the woods in South Dakota and there would be just a plethora of sightings. Bigfoot's camping out, having a rave party.
Yeah,
We'd never know.
I have 2 more encounters here, and then I think that's kind of nearing the end of my notes, but this other one took place as well in 1973. Mrs. Refa Heightfield and her 13-year-old son were sleeping in a trailer in Cincinnati, Ohio on the morning of October 21st. Refa woke up at around 2:30 a.m. to get some water and took note of some strange lights in the nearby parking lot sky. They were shaped like a bubble umbrella almost and reaching around like 7 feet in diameter. And nearby, she spotted a gray-haired ape-like creature with a downward angled snout, no neck, a sizable waist, moving very slowly. It walked into the light, and then minutes later, both had disappeared. The next one I have, this one, I actually tried to make extra digging because I was just doing some online research and looking, and this one takes place in Rutland, Kelowna, British Columbia.
Ooh, that's within walking distance of us.
I know. This was in August in 1976. We're looking at a near 50 years ago. So I imagine, again, looking at Kelowna back in the 70s, it would have been a lot more forested and everything. Even now in the Rutland area, there's still a lot of forest around and a lot of farmland trying to be developed, but not yet. So in August of 1976, after a series of UFO sightings hit the community of Rutland, several men and their children saw a hairy ape-like entity 6 to 7 feet tall roaming about a mountainside. They also found clumps of hair that they sent to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for identification. Laboratory analysis confirmed it was primate hair, but significantly it could not be matched to any known species, which is usually the cause with so many of these hair samples that are found, or otherwise discarded due to human contamination, as they like to put it. They, as in the labs working on these tests, but I went a step further and I reached out to a little portion of the RCMP because I was curious, like, how far back do your records go? Like, well, it depends on the case and the scenario, but it's not all of it is really public knowledge, and they don't go back that far. Basically, after a while, they'll be kind of just tossed out or whatever. And I thought, okay,
That's so sad.
well, a Bigfoot related case is probably definitely tossed out. Like, yeah. So, oh, and I mean, it doesn't disconnect the fact that it didn't happen. I mean, there's a high chance that something like this could have still took place, but I mean, we don't know. And I mean, again, we don't know. That's all I can say. But at the end of the day, you can't discount the fact this didn't happen. It took place a while ago. So
Yeah. Man, I don't know if you noticed, Taylor, but partway through you talking there, I got disconnected real briefly.
I did notice, and I was still talking to kind of like so the listeners wouldn't know.
Oh, yeah, I swiped back. I'm in the middle of call here, ladies and gentlemen, and I did 2 finger swipes on my MacBook to go back a page accidentally instead of 3 finger swipes to go to a different window altogether. My bad. Now, it's interesting to me, Taylor, that you brought up human contamination in hair samples and DNA and the like. I remember digging into this because that topic bugged me a lot, and I thought, well, how do you contaminate DNA? Just like a crime scene, if you pick up a gun or a weapon or whatever in a murder scene, and you get your fingerprints all over it, it makes you a suspect. DNA contamination is quite similar. While you can't actually contaminate a strand of DNA, it's almost wrong to use the word, you can make it incredibly hard to find the DNA that you want to examine by mixing your own DNA into the pile. Because basically when they want to examine DNA, or a hair sample, for instance, they have to dig through it all, get a close look at it, and make sure they actually have the right thing selected. So if you were to take a weapon with a lot of fingerprints on it, and you touched it everywhere, you basically put your fingerprints over top the old fingerprints until those old fingerprints are gone. There's hardly any trace of them, right? And stuck to your fingers is probably DNA from the original person, and you just discard that. You shed it. So DNA contamination is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the hay is all of your DNA, and the only DNA strand you want examined is that needle. So with hair, DNA, all that kind of stuff, it's important to keep everything uncontaminated, put on those gloves, put everything together.
I like how you explain that. So again, touching hair would result in contamination, is what you're
on the DNA side of
reinforcing.
things, yes.
Yes, okay.
Now, if you were to look at it under a microscope and you were to look for that little medulla, the fiber that they use to identify where that hair comes from, not so much. But if they dive into the DNA side of it, yes, definitely.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah, and again, that just seems to be the case with so many things. I almost feel like maybe it's like a cop-out at times, maybe. Like, I feel like most people, when they find something like this after a sighting, they're going to be very cautious with it and refrain from getting their DNA on it. They're going to be self-conscious of it.
And if anyone with authority has something to hide, they're not going to want to send it back or send back proper results. And if you send out something and clearly say, hey, I found Bigfoot hair, can you examine it? How many people are going to believe you? And they're going to go, oh, some crazy person sent in some hair. Do I really bother to look at this? Maybe I'll look at it and go, oh, it's kind of similar to this. It must be that. And then they don't really send back the appropriate information.
Yeah, it gets lost in the mail, it gets convoluted, or it just kind of gets vanished mysteriously.
Yeah, just like a lot of these theories do. I mean, the idea of Bigfoot being an alien prisoner, this being a prisoner planet, or maybe genetically engineered, or Bigfoot's a more spiritual being. There's so many theories out there. It's hard to keep track of all of them, and it's hard not to want to discard a few of them too. it's interesting to dive into this and look at all the different aspects of what ties all these things together. And I know we didn't really dive into the ghost thing too much, but going back to the orbs, I think that is super cool. That basically all of the paranormal and UFO and Bigfoot stuff just has something common about it. I would never link Bigfoot to ghosts, but then you dive into orbs in the quantum realm, Bigfoot's cloaking or uncloaking, maybe how that affects our reality. What does that mean about the concept of ghosts or any kind of supernatural life like demons or angels?
Well, it stacks partially with, and again, this is where the ghost connects to the aliens. Vessels that are put on the planet that can just be taken over, whether by ghosts, demons, aliens. It's just incredible how this crazy triangle of different things, cryptid, alien, and paranormal, connect. The Illuminati triangle, there you go. It's quite fascinating. It really, really is. And I'm sure we'll probably get more into the paranormal kind of connection with this. That'd be a good, maybe another episode, like, because we just did Bigfoot and UFOs. Well, let's do Bigfoot and paranormal.
Yeah, let's dive back into that in a future episode. And I think I'm pretty much all the way through my notes. Taylor, I think you're pretty much all the way through yours. So while we're talking about future episodes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to this episode of Cryptid Clues. Taylor, I'll let you take us out as per always, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, you know where to find us. CryptidClues.ca is our website. You can send us an email if you want to say hi, any questions, just want to chat. CryptidClues@gmail.com. And you can find us in our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And again, that Patreon, ad-free, exclusive early episodes, and some brand new Patreon tiers on there. Shouts to Kapruka. So until next time, see you soon. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.